question just to yourselves. Just think your answer for about a minute here. It's going to be weird and quiet for like another minute. 2 whole silent minutes in a church service. What are we going to do? And I want you to think about your last encounter with God. I say that phrase very specifically. Encounter with God. Take a minute and really think about that, okay? Okay. Hopefully you had a really clear image in your head. Can I tell you about mine? Sure. Mine was really cool. It was at camp this week because we had our Northwest Youth Camp, which Ash was at and Jaden was at. They had a great time. They were nuts the whole time. They had a great time. We had fewer kids than ever, fewer counselors than ever. It was really small. It was really intimate, really holy. Like holy ground the entire week. Just everyone was there. They were in it to win it. Tons of positive experiences, tons of breakthroughs. And for me, on Wednesday night, we had a big bonfire, sang some worship songs, and I got to worship next to my best friend, Jared. Maybe you met Jared. Jared is an exuberant worshiper. I'll put it that way. He's, yeah, come on, boom. If he ever watches this, he's going to laugh. Jared's a big-time, expressive worshiper, and to worship next to him reminded me about something about God. And it was a type of encounter with God. It brought me a ton of joy, which is something we're going to talk about today. It reminded me of where I'm at, or where I was at in that moment. And I hope that you guys have had encounters like this with God. Maybe it's through worship, maybe you're reading something in the scriptures and you're like, yes, that's it, I found it. There's tons of ways to have an encounter with God. And what I'm going to do today, I'm going to walk through this scripture in Hebrews 12, and we're going to talk about what it means to truly have an encounter with God. What are the descriptors so you know that it's happening when it's happening? Does that make sense? Yeah. So we're in this mountain series. Right now we're in the ascent. This is the last week of the ascent where we're striving for an encounter with God. We're trying to figure out, okay, how do I even spend time with God? How do I know an encounter if I had one? Next month, we're going to look at a bunch of different encounters with God. We're going to look at Moses. We're going to look at Jesus on the mountain. There's all these incredible stories of people going to the mountaintop and having a conversation with God. And then we're going to talk about bringing the encounter with you so that your friends and your neighbors and your coworkers and your family can also have an encounter with God. But for today, we're talking about Hebrews 12. So turn over to Hebrews 12 with me. We got to talk really quick about the book of Hebrews. Because you may not know this, but the Bible was not written to you. No! I mean, it was in the macro sense of like, anyone can read the Bible, and anyone can get anything out of it. That's what we love. But Hebrews was written to a very specific group of people. It was written to first century Christians who were coming out of Judaism. And we're still practicing Judaism in a lot of ways. And so there's a bunch of nudges and hints and inside jokes kind of about Hebrew history. The writer here, you don't know who the writer is, but the writer knows his or her history. They know it really well. And so they're making all these comments and references that if you aren't part of this culture, it's really hard to pick up on them. So we're going to look at these nudges and hints and things. We're going to talk about cultural DNA. We're going to talk about a better way. That is really the theme of the book of Hebrews, at least to me. That, hey, Israel, the Jewish people, they've been doing things what they thought was God's way for a long time. It was good that there's an even better way through Jesus. Amen? That's something we can all agree on. But the question that gets asked here in Hebrews 12 is a question that we ask today, which is, how do I know that I'm having an encounter with God? How do I know that I'm talking to Him? And I think that brings a lot of old fears and old biases. Maybe in your childhood you grew up and your idea of God was, really scary, or really big and powerful, but not personal. A lot of times, old relationships that we have, we kind of put those relationships on God. Maybe a parent or a grandparent or a teacher or some authority figure in your life was not the best to you until you've applied those characteristics to God. So the idea of an encounter with God sounds like being brought to the principal's office because you're in trouble. That's not what we're going to talk about. We are actually going to talk about that a little bit today, but that is not what the writer of Hebrews prescribes. Let's read Hebrews 12, verse 18 through 21 here. I'm just going to read from my Bible. Verse 18, the writer says, "You have not come to a mountain that can be touched and is burning with fire, to darkness, gloom, and storm, to a trumpet blast, or to such a voice speaking words that those who heard it begged that no further word be spoken to them, because they could not bear what was commanded. If even an animal touches the mountain, it must be stoned." The sight was so terrifying that Moses said, "I am trembling with fear." Inside jokes, nudges, hints, all over the place right here. This was not good to us. We got to do a little deciphering and context corner, all that fun stuff that we love to do. We got to talk about this here. We're talking about Mount Sinai. Anybody who read this or heard this in the first century would have been like, "Oh, Mount Sinai, Exodus, right?" And maybe you know that story. But if you don't know that story, that's the story of a group of enslaved Jewish people, enslaved Hebrews. They were enslaved by Egypt, and they've just recently become ex-slaves. They're out of Egypt. They've been saved from slavery. They've been freed for a purpose. They don't know this yet, but God has a plan for them. He didn't just bring them into the desert and say, "Go nuts." He's got a plan for them. And he says, "You're out of Egypt. You're not slaves anymore. That's not your identity. I'm going to give you a new identity in me, in your relationship with me. But what we got to do, we got to go to Mount Sinai. We're going to have a little conversation, me and you." What happens, the way a lot of scholars read it, is that Mount Sinai, the book of Leviticus and such, it's like a marriage covenant. Like, that's how loving and intimate this relationship is between God and his people. He wants to marry Israel. Whoa, right? Huge. And a lot of people think, okay, Sinai is like the ceremony, and the Ten Commandments are like vows. It says, hey, we're going to be in this relationship. Here's what we can and can't do to each other, for each other. It's a really cool idea. And for us, that heritage continues. We are God's people. We believe, we become God's people once we have a relationship with Jesus. But even in that, I can still have this mentality about talking to God. I can have this idea that God is mad at me. God is angry at the world. God is a punisher. He's a destroyer. He's gloom and fire and darkness and storm. And so try to avoid him at all costs. Only go to him when you really, really need something, because he likes to yell and he likes to be praised and things. Maybe that's your experience with God. Maybe this is what you grew up with. Maybe you still have pieces of trembling with fear when you spend time with God. I want to pray, but I don't want to bother him, because he really hates that. Maybe you have this trembling feeling when you go to church. Even now, even maybe after years and years of going to church, you still go, oh man, I gotta be on my best behavior here. This is where the serious stuff happens, right? Because we're so serious in church. Mount Sinai is a mountain of gloom and fire and darkness, and if that's the end of the story, it's not a very good story. So let's read Exodus 19 real quick. Let's do some more context. Exodus 19 right here. I gotta pull it out. I pre-flipped, which, let me tell you guys, game changer as a preacher. You gotta pre-flip. Exodus 19, verse 16, that's where we'll start. They've come to Mount Sinai. God's kind of trying to set up Moses and the people. Verse 16, on the morning of the third day, there was thunder and lightning and a thick cloud over the mountain and a very loud trumpet blast. Everyone in the camp trembled. And Moses led the people out of the camp to meet with God. And they stood before the mountain. Mount Sinai was covered with smoke because the Lord descended on it in fire. The Lord billowed up from it like smoke from a furnace. The whole mountain trembled violently, and the sound of the trumpet grew louder and louder. Then Moses spoke with the voice, and the voice of God answered him. Fun, right? Cool. This is our God now? This is the God of the underdogs? This is the God that saved us? That sounds terrifying. And if that's your first experience with this God, maybe you've been seeing him plague Egypt, maybe you saw him part the seas, you've seen him do awesome stuff, and now he wants to talk to you, you're in the principal's office. Scary. I don't want to have a relationship with a God who terrifies me. I don't think anybody does. But if that might be your end story with God. That might be as far as you've gotten in your understanding of him. God seeks a marriage covenant. God wants a loving relationship. That's kind of the irony through here, is that he comes in with smoke and fire, but really he just wants to have a conversation. He wants to have a loving talk with Israel, and he wants to set up a relationship with them. But what do the Israelites do? They stand at a distance. They're like, I can't go anywhere near there. And in fact, Moses, you got to do it for us. We're not going to go, Moses, you go talk to God because you have the magic and we don't. So you guys, you just do it because I don't want anything to do with this guy. And that simple decision, that one decision of Israel to let Moses do all the work, to let Moses be the priest, sets up centuries of a misinformed relationship with God. One decision at Mount Sinai. They saw thunder, they saw smoke, they saw lightning, and they went, nope, time out. I don't want face-to-face time with this guy. You do it. You have the magic. So what was your first impression of God? Think back. Maybe you were a kid. It was your first ever church service. I know for me, I grew up going to church, and people were very serious at church. They dressed nicer than they did at home. People shushed you a lot. Try not to shush. I'll still be a shusher sometimes. But there was a lot of trembling. Because I was a kid in a world of adults, and so God to me was a very angry adult at times. In fact, I talked about this at camp a little bit. God to me was like a lifeguard, which means he's up there, I'm down here, and he has a whistle in his mouth. And if I do anything wrong, I'm going to get kicked out of the pool. Not healthy, to say the least. And I'm still working through a lot of those feelings. It's like, don't let God be mad at you. Don't do anything wrong. He gets upset a lot. He's a big angry God. If that's your God, then you get stuck at this mountain. It can't possibly be pleasant. The whole camp trembles when this is the God you serve. And God, ironically, God's coming in with a big entrance, but this is not the end story with God. God goes, hey, if you can just get past the scary part, if you can just get over the first hurdle, guess what comes next? Loving relationship. You just get past the one scary thing. Think about everything I've done for you already. Now you get to be my people. But you don't even get to that point, really. Not to the place that God really wanted them to be. And Israel's setup from this point on is there's the people, and there's God, and there's middlemen. Forever. It's Moses for a while, it's Aaron for a while, it's their sons, it's Joshua, it's the judges, it's the priests in the temple. But there's always this division. There's God, and there's the people, and there's the goat. And that is our story. I'm a good Christian, and there's God, but somebody else has to do the work. Somebody else has to lead me into an encounter with God. You're missing out on half the story. There's such a better relationship. There's such a better mountain that we get to go to. And the plan all along was not this. It was that we be a kingdom of priests. Turn over to verse 4. There it is. God's speaking to Moses. And in verse 4, God says, this is what you need to tell Israel. Tell your people this real quick about me. You yourselves have seen what I did to Egypt and how I carried you on eagle's wings and I brought you to myself. Now, if you obey me fully, keep my covenant, then out of all nations you will be my treasured possession. Although the whole earth is mine, you will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words you are to speak to the Israelites. I'm going to read that again. You'll be my treasured possession. You'll be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That was the plan. God's like, come over to Sinai. You're not going to believe it. Every single one of you gets to have a priestly relationship with me. It's a loving relationship. And yes, there's obedience. There's a couple rules, just like in any relationship. Wyatt and I are friends. We have rules. I don't punch him in the face. He doesn't spit on me. Those are our only 2 rules. There's more than that, right? There's natural rules in a relationship. But God goes, hey, if you follow the rules, if you just meet me where I'm at here, at Mount Sinai, kingdom of priests, holy nation, treasured possession. What do people do? They stand at a distance. They go, I don't want whatever God's selling here. I'm going to tremble. I'm going to defer to Moses. And history writes itself. And I think about myself, and I think a lot of us have this feeling. I think sometimes we hear this term, kingdom of priests or holy nation, and it creates this longing. You guys relate to that at all? Kind of like a nag, but it's like at your chest level where you're like, oh, I want that. That sounds really good. That sounds better than what I'm doing. Honestly, I've been doing the Christian thing 14, 15 years now. It's been a while. And I've read this phrase, this kingdom of priests idea my whole life, but until I started to really understand it, I didn't realize there was a better way. I lived at this mountain. I lived at Mount Sinai. Even as a Christian, you can live at Mount Sinai if you have a small version of God, a thunder and lightning version of God. Once you realize that it's all about relationship and that anyone gets to be Moses, whoa, hang on, God might have just done something right there. That's different. That's way better than my idea. God's idea of a relationship with us, God's idea of an encounter with us is so much better than our idea of an encounter with Him. That's cool. That blows my mind. So if you're seeking more, if you're feeling like, man, there's got to be more to this Christian thing, maybe this is the more that you're seeking. Maybe the idea of being a priest, a kingdom of priests, is what you're seeking. There's 2 feelings. The first is the nag, right? It's kind of just like, you read the scriptures, you go to church, you're like, wait, I feel like there might be more. Maybe you can't name it, you can't put a language to it, but it's this nagging of like, no, this is unfinished. There's something more out there. There's something better. That's a good feeling to pursue. The other feeling is longing when you see somebody else figure it out. Maybe you've had friends or you've known people in church, other Christian folks who have figured this out and they have that kind of relationship with God. And they're always telling you about it. They're like, oh man, this crazy quiet time where, man, this worship service blew my mind. They're in it. They're on the other mountain. And you feel this longing like, man, I want to go to Magic Mountain. I'm stuck at the other, I don't know any of the Disneyland places. I'm stuck at Splash Mountain getting all wet. It's the worst. I want to go to Magic. I want to go to the good mountain. You guys want to talk about the good mountain? Yeah. Back to Hebrews chapter 12. The good news is that it's a calm responsibility. If you're feeling the nagging, if you're feeling the longing, just know that those are feelings for the old mountain. At the new mountain, you don't have to feel that anymore. Verse 22, but you, that's you, have come to Mount Zion, to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. You have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly, to the church of the firstborn, whose names are written in heaven. You have come to God, the judge of all, to the spirits of the righteous made perfect, to Jesus the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Lots of nudges, lots of hints. I want to go through each one, because there's so much good stuff here that is so beyond my framework of what God even is. It blows my mind. I hope it does the same thing for you. This is what an encounter with God is. We're going to break it down piece by piece. The first piece, you have come to thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. Think back to that. Okay, I was like, hey, take a minute, think about your most recent encounter with God. Was it a joyful assembly? Or were you like, yeah, I had this really tough prayer time, it was just sad, and I walked away despairing even worse than before? Was it Mount Sinai or was it Mount Zion? Because on Mount Zion, true encounter with God is thousands upon thousands of angels in joyful assembly. That's an incredible thought. I love that joy is the connection piece. That joy is the key central cog kind of holding it together. That doesn't matter what background you come in from, what biases you have, the hurts in your past, all of us get to meet at this joyful place. That's the center point. That's the meeting place for everybody. Even in the church, we all have such crazy different backgrounds, crazy different experiences with God. Where do we meet? Love and joy for God. Love and joyful assembly. Praise, worship. That is an encounter with God. The next weird thing here. The church of the firstborn. Okay, what does that mean? That's a weird one. There's this cool idea. There's this Hebrew word aid, E-I-D. Aid, it means witness. And then so that's one witness. And then there's Eidah, E-I-D-A-H, should put it in the slides. Eidah, which is the community of witnesses. What were the Israelites doing at Mount Sinai? They were becoming a community of witnesses. Witnesses of what? Nope. Witnesses of what?
The mountain.
The mountain. God on the mountain. Jesus wasn't there yet. It comes a little bit later. They were witnessing God's presence. What are we doing here? We're witnessing God's presence. We're not Israel. Not necessarily. But we get the exact same experience as a church. A church is a community of witnesses. Just like Israel. We're a community of people who witness to the presence of God in our lives. We're a God. So the church of the firstborn is a community of witnesses who are firstborn. Now, what does that mean? Think about how special a firstborn is in this society. For us, we don't split up the inheritance this way, but in first century Israel, the firstborn got all of the rights, got most of the inheritance. They were loved, they were secure. Just the order in which you were born set you up for life. And God says, every single one of you is a firstborn. Whoa. And not only that, we're a church of the firstborn, Jesus, the firstborn amongst our royal priesthood, our Eidah. We're the church of the firstborn. Think about the worth of a firstborn. How valuable God sees you. He sees you the way he sees Jesus. You are valuable. You're worthy. I'm going to give you an inheritance. You're loved. You're secure. Does that define your encounters with God? Security, investment, self-worth. Whoa. Let's keep going. Whose names are written in heaven. Oh, I love this one. What does it mean to have your name written in heaven? You're in. That's it. You're good. Oh, but nope, you're good. Well, nope. You're good. That's it. We're done. That means no more striving. That means no more working off your debt. That means no more quiet nights alone at your house. Like, am I even going to heaven? What is that? Like the panic, right? That we can put on ourselves sometimes when we make a mistake. Nope. You're good. Your name is written. There are two books. There's a book with everything you ever did, and that's sending you to hell. And there's another book that's sending you to heaven, and it has your name. That messes me up, man. Just this idea that, like, oh, but I've served the poor and I've done this, and I'm a Bible talker, whatever. Right? Look at all the stuff I did. Nope, just your name. It's written. You're good. No more striving. You're done. Isn't that either makes you panic or that frees you up a lot? That dislodges something in my soul and gets it kind of shaky again. It does some really good stuff for me. No more striving and no more middlemen. If your name is written, you don't have to go to Moses for your news. You don't need a Moses. You don't need a priest. You don't need a pastor. You don't even need a preacher necessarily. Suddenly my job is not about giving you, hey, I talked to God and he said, you all need to shape up. That's not the way the system works. It's each of us coming up here and sharing from the overflow of our hearts to one another because we're all at the same mountain. That's cool. All right. Party's over. God's the judge of all. Ooh, bummer. No. God, you've come to God, the judge of all. And for most people, and for myself for a long time, that was a negative connotation. God is a judge. Judges punish. That's that. God the punisher of all. God the destroyer of all. Well, let's rethink judgment for a second. What is judgment? Judgment is exposure. Judgment is the revealing of something. And the craziest thing is that God exposes everything about you. He reveals everything, 100% exposed, and loves you anyways. Is that not true love? If I love what I know about you, that's nice. But God knows every single thing about you and loves you anyways. Another way of reading it, you've come to God, the exposer and true lover of all. That's an encounter with God. Is your judge a punisher or an exposer and a lover? Very different mountains. A lot of us see thunder and lightning and smoke and fire and gloom, and we tremble, and we don't get to know the revealer. The exposer. The person who knows the worst parts of my heart, my worst mistakes, and loves me anyways. This is an encounter with God. Going, there's so much here. We're going to skip over Jesus for a second. We're going to talk about the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. And honestly, the writer had me up till here. I'm like, blood of Abel? What? Where did that come from? We were doing so good. You had to bring up Cain and Abel. What in the world? Well, what is the blood of Abel? The first murder in the Bible. Genesis 5, 4, Genesis 3. Thank you. Genesis 3. Number 3. Genesis 3. Cain and Abel, two brothers. Cain kills Abel, and Abel's blood cries out for vengeance, and a cycle is born. Of I hurt you, and you don't get even, because we never get even, do we? There's always going to be a little bit extra. You say this, I say something very similar, but a little bit worse. And then you're stuck feeling like, no, I got to get even now. A cycle of vengeance and violence that has continued up to this present day. Nope. Push it that way. In the old mountain, there was revenge and vengeance, and this is my form of justice. On the new mountain, we have the blood of Christ. And there's no more cycle. The cycle is broken. Think about the violence that you do to yourself day in and day out. Self-loathing, that's violence. Judging other people, comparison, that's a type of self-violence. Right? Where I go, oh, that person has that, and I don't. Is that not violence against your spirit? There's so many types of violence. Something I've been studying out recently, this idea of like, violence is not just physical, it's spiritual, it's psychological. There's so many ways in which we can hurt others and hurt ourselves because this is the only cycle we know. If I live on that mountain, Mount Sinai, then I gotta get even. No. On Zion, that doesn't even exist. That's not part of it. An encounter with God means that if I've been hurt, I can leave the hurts at the foot of the mountain. I can go up, I can just spend time with God with no need for vengeance, no need for reprisal, any of that stuff. That's incredible. The last bit here. The most important bit. What defines an encounter with God? Jesus, the mediator. It's not possible without Jesus. A true encounter, the building and the arrival of Mount Zion only happens through the life and the death and the resurrection of Jesus. Without his life, how can anybody live this way? We need an example. Without his death, how can the cycle be broken? Without his resurrection, how can we possibly find our path to Zion? Life, death, and resurrection. Jesus mediates a new relationship, a better marriage relationship. Not defined by vengeance, not defined by bloodshed, not defined by trembling and fear and gloom and all the things we can associate with God. It's defined by joy. It's defined by witnessing. It's defined by security. It's defined by purpose and mission. It's defined by exposure and true love. It's defined by the breaking of a cycle. This is an encounter with God. When was your last one? I need to reach back a little bit. Because I have a lot of Mount Sinai encounters with God. It's like I punch in my clock, I get out, did my time at church, did my time at Bible talk, did my time, my half hour or hour every morning. Nothing really changed. I actually just kind of feel worse about myself now. This is different. And this is not just like let me take a quick jog over to Mount Zion. This takes a level of intent. This takes a level of purpose to meet this God and have this kind of relationship with God. The question I want to ask, which mountain do I live on? Doesn't mean you spend every second of every day there. When you go to bed at night, which mountain do you live on? What story do you tell yourself about God? What story does your life tell to other people? Is it the story your life is telling to your coworkers and your kids and your family and your neighbors? If that story is, yep, life's tough, God's mad, better get right with him because we're all hopping on the lifeboat before he takes down the whole world. That's not a very good story, and it's not accurate. The story God wants to tell through our lives is one of redemption, one of a kingdom of priests, a group of ex-slaves to sin, who get out of Egypt, who find a better way forward, who say yes in a scary moment of commitment to God, and start living lives of joy and love and security. Whoa, that's a good story. I would like not just to hear that story, but to be part of that story very badly. There's two mountains and there's two postures. There's the posture of, I am never going to figure this thing out. God is mad at me, and I just got to keep my head down till I get out of here. Then there's the posture of, I'm home. I got nothing left to strive for. I have found my resting place. And this is where I want to be. And this is the place I want to bring other people to, because it's been very good to me. Two mountains, two stories, two postures. But nope, that's the old mountain. Well, nope, not quite. That's the old mountain. There's a story that you're telling yourself about why you don't deserve to be there, why you're not worthy. Man, is that a boring story. Can we move on from that story of like, oh, but I could never be that kind of Christian. Yeah, he's awesome, she's great, I could never be that faithful. What a boring story. Of course you can. You're in a kingdom of priests. You can live on that mountain. Why not? You're stopping you. God's not stopping you. He's invited you to Mount Zion. Yeah, but like, you're busy. Oh, come on, guys. It's Magic Mountain. Where else would you want to be? It's Mount Zion. If you don't have time for joy and love and security, I don't know what to do with you. Honestly, I don't have an answer for you. But that's the old mountain. Of course the cross makes you worthy. Of course Jesus' life, death, and resurrection make you worthy. It's a boring question, it's a tired question, it's one we don't have to ask when we're together. It's one you don't even have to ask when you're alone at night and you're really trying to figure out which mountain you live on. You can tell yourself a much better story because it's the true story. Jesus invites us not to live on Mount Sinai, not to live in gloom and doom, but to live on Mount Zion and to have an encounter with God that changes everything. When you have this kind of encounter with God, the joyful, loving, witnessing, secure, inheriting, exposing, true, loving, mediating, cycle-breaking encounter with God, it changes everything. They're just different. What did Moses look like when he came down the mountain? Pop quiz. Radiant. His face was so beautiful, people couldn't look at him. I've been there. Look, I've been that beautiful. No. I've had that kind of encounter with God where people are like, you're different. Something happened to you, usually after camp or retreat or some mountaintop experience, right? But maybe it's just a really good quiet time. Maybe it's a really good prayer on the way home. You come home, your spouse is like, whoa, you been working out? Something different? Haircut? Nope. I just had this kind of encounter with God today. Why can't this happen every day? Why can't we live on this mountain? Jesus enables it and he invites us to live there. What I want us to do this week, because we're about to spend a whole month on the mountaintop, I would love for us to seriously reflect on our recent encounters with God. And if you don't recognize this, if you're like, that's new, that's different, talk to somebody. Try to go have that encounter together with them. Have somebody else lead you up the mountain so that you can experience it for yourself. Really consider, which mountain are you living on? Which story is your life telling? We're headed towards Mount Zion. We're at the foot right now. We're about to go up and experience something crazy together. Love you guys. Grace and peace. I'm sorry, I was on a roll. Yeah. I'm going to pray for our communion really quick, because that's what we do here. Do you feel the joy, though? Yeah. Is it not good to be at the foot of the mountain about to go up? Let's pray to God. Father, thank you. thank you for forgiving me, for putting up so many times with me. God, telling me a better story that's not about putting up with my sin. That's not about bearing with me, but it's about inheritance and true love and exposure, God. Thank you for your son, Jesus, who died on a cross, on a mountain, so that we can have the same kind of mountaintop experience, God. The same kind of encounter with you that changes everything about our lives. God, I pray right now, so sincerely, help us to have a purposeful, intentional, joyful, loving, sincere encounter with you as we reflect on your son's life, his death, and his resurrection. God, I pray for this week. Help us have a week of encounters with you. Help us to bring other people into an encounter with you. And I pray that as we start to have these encounters more frequently and more deeply, that we, too, can change our community and the world around us, God. I love you. For all these things in your son's name. Amen.